立法會主
The President.
政府
Government Bill. This Council now continues with the second reading debate on the Appropriation Bill 2020. Members had already spoken at the last meeting. I will now call upon the Secretaries concerned to speak and then the Financial Secretary to reply. Secretary for Food and Health. Mr. President, in relation to this year's budget, first of all, I'd like to thank members for their valuable comments and suggestions in relation to livelihood issues under my bureau, as well as the work of the government to fight the epidemic. The development of COVID-19 is developing very quickly. There has been an accumulated number of cases at 3 million cases. Within a very short time, the situation may change, and it has a huge impact on people's health, livelihood, as well as the economy. In the past month, in relation to our anti-epidemic work, we focused on, first, prevent imported cases, two, to prevent an outbreak within the community from these imported cases in order to protect public health as well as our healthcare system. We have put special emphasis on various measures relating to enhanced testing as well as social distancing. We aim at using the containment strategy of early detection, isolation, and treatment in order to contain COVID-19. The healthcare workers as well as frontline workers have been working tirelessly, and with the cooperation of the public, we see that the situation recently has somewhat abated. In the past 2 weeks, new confirmed cases stand at single digit. For consecutive 5 days, we have not recorded any confirmed cases. Over 90% of the cases are related cases, or people during the incubation period have been traveling outside Hong Kong, or they are their close contacts. This shows that our measures to control border traveling across the border, social distancing, as well as enhanced monitoring and quarantine have been proved to be effective. In relation to the ever-changing situation and in order to minimize the risk of the situation getting worse, yesterday I have announced a number of measures. They include the extension of the validity periods of compulsory quarantine of certain persons arriving at Hong Kong CAP regulation CAP 599C to the 7th of June in order to expand the category of persons with exemption. They include cross-boundary students as well as related personnel and service providers, as well as persons having manufacturing operations or business activities or professional services that are to be in the interest of Hong Kong's economic development. I have also extended the validity period of the Prevention and Control of Disease Disclosure of Information Regulation, CAP 599D. We'll keep in view the situation of the epidemic and review our measures from time to time. These are my response to members' suggestions in relation to the budget. On healthcare, in 2016, the government announced the first hospital development plan of 10 years. And we have earmarked $200 billion for various projects. We expect that under the program, there will be an additional 6,000 hospital beds and over 90 surgical theaters to be completed. We have already started, we plan to submit proposals of 4 of the projects to the PWSC. We have already done that within this year. We hope that we will get members' support. The Hospital Authority has also proposed a second development program. This will churn out over 9,000 beds and other additional facilities in order to meet demand all the way to 2013. The HA will also take into account their experience in fighting the epidemic in planning the next hospital development plan and consider the need for additional isolation beds. In relation to alleviating the demand of isolation beds in the public sector, the HA has, starting from the end of March, set up triage stations at A&E departments in public hospitals and converted 1 or 2 general wards in each cluster to become standard negative pressure wards in order to provide an additional 400 beds for those that have recovered or with minor symptoms. The HA will continue to monitor the situation and put in place various measures. In order to enhance the capacity of public hospitals to deal with the pandemic, the government has, under the first round of the Anti-Epidemic Fund, earmarked $4.7 billion for the HA to increase resources for additional manpower expenditure, the procurement of PPEs, as well as enhancement of various tests, procurement of medicine, and healthcare equipment. Under the Special Emergency Response Allowance, the HA has used this to show their recognition of people engaged in high-risk duties. In order to adjust the service capacity under the epidemic, the HA has enhanced certain areas of public-private cooperation to divert the demand to the private sector. These are diagnostic imaging, hemodialysis, as well as colonoscopy. The HA has also been liaising with the public sector to start new projects, say, for example, newborn jaundice, cesarean services, as well as radiology treatment for cancer patients. In order to make available an additional rehabilitation plan for patients of COVID-19, and in order to allow Chinese medicine practitioners to play a bigger role, with the support of the Bureau and after consulting experts, we have launched a special Chinese medicine outpatient program to provide outpatient rehabilitation service for discharged persons at the Chinese Medicine Clinic Training and Research Center. In order to address the problem of acute manpower shortage, we have increased the number of places in training to increase funding, as well as the training capacity of universities. The government will also actively enhance our overseas publicity in relation to our registration arrangement to attract overseas eligible talents to come to Hong Kong to practice. Given our changes in population as well as our demography, we will provide an increasing amount of recurrent expenditure to the HA. We have shown an increase of expenditure to the HA by 35% to $75 billion in the 2020 and 21 year compared to 2017-18 in order for them to enhance their manpower as well as services. These are the key areas of their service of their programs. First, to enhance the special retired and rehire scheme to encourage more senior and retired doctors to continue to serve until the age of 65. Within 5 years, there will be an additional 200 associate consultants to be promoted to consultants, and the offering of additional allowance for registered nurses with specialist training and qualification. We will continue to enhance primary health care. We will use district as the basis and launch the district health center in various sectors and the DHC Express to all 18 districts in order to enhance members of the public's ability to take care of themselves and to provide better support to those chronically ill. Currently, we issue elderly healthcare voucher to those over the age of 65. The amount is $2,000 for them to use healthcare service in the private sector. With an aging population, we expect that demand will increase. We consider the sustainability of this program, and we have no plans to increase the monetary amount or to lower the eligible age. There are 2 rounds of relief measures under the Anti-Epidemic Fund. It stands at a total of $287.5 billion in order to support enterprises and employment. On catering industry, under the first round, we have already set up the Food Licenses Holders Subsidy Scheme to provide funding support for those eligible. As at yesterday, there are altogether 27,000 license holders that have benefited from the program, and the amount involved stands at $3.56 billion. As the F&B industry has been affected by the social distancing measures under the second round of the fund, we have launched a catering business social distancing subsidy scheme and make available to eligible catering businesses $250,000 to $2.2 million as subsidy. There is also a $50,000 subsidy for eligible catering businesses that have to close, and we also offer the same amount to store license holders in public wet market. These businesses can submit their application starting from early May. The FEHD will release the amount as soon as possible. Earlier on, we have also made announcements to waive the license fees, renewal fees for eating places between October last year and September this year. We'll continue to listen to the sector. In relation to the fisheries and agricultural industry, under the first round of the fund, we have made available subsidy of $80,000 to $200,000 to live marine fish wholesale traders, as well as fishing vessels with mainland deckhands. As at yesterday, over 1,000 wholesale traders and owners of fishing vessels have benefited. The amount of subsidy stands at $160 million. Under the second round of the fund, we will make available $10,000 subsidy to local agricultural and fisheries producers. Also, under the Fisheries Development Loan Fund, we have made available an interest-free deferment of loan repayment for 1 year for application. In order to promote a sustainable development in this sector, we have provided support under the two Sustainable Development Fund. In relation to the agri-park, well, with funding support from the LegCo, we will start the first phase construction as soon as possible. We will continue to combat illegal fishing. The AFCD will work with the police and mainland authorities to combat such illegal activities using technology. Well, we have been using appropriate measures to fight the epidemic. We understand various measures involving social distancing as well as quarantine will adversely impact people's livelihood as well as businesses. I thank members of the public for their cooperation and their restraint for their help to contain the situation in the community. I also thank healthcare workers, government departments, the Department of Health, auxiliary medical service, as well as voluntary teams in their contribution. I hope that Hong Kong will start again after the pandemic.
Secretary for Security. Mr. President, some members have proposed to cut the police's budget in this financial year. I'm staunchly opposed to these resolutions, as these are extremely irresponsible. It is believed that the animosity towards the police started in June last year, as the police had been tasked to deal with a spate of serious violent incidents stemming from protests and demonstrations. Starting from June last year, there had been over 1,400 public order events, many of which had turned into serious law-breaking violent acts. I'd like to remind everyone here the violence committed by rioters in various districts in Hong Kong. They blocked roads, they vandalized shops, banks, MTR stations, street facilities, traffic lights, government properties, police stations. Hundreds and thousands of paving bricks were dug up, which could fill 48 basketball courts. The railings that were demolished spanned 52,000 meters, 125 times of the height of IFC2. And rioters even hurled bricks, corrosive bombs, shot metal beads, arrows, and some rioters even tied up members of the public who held different political views. They engaged in false imprisonment and assault. And these law-breaking violent acts happened in the airport and also on the streets. Some members of the public had their heads bashed. Some had them set on fire. And a member of the public was even killed as a result of hurling of bricks. The rioters also used a large amount of petrol bombs. According to police estimates, in the violent incidents, rioters hurled at least 5,000 petrol bombs, and in police operations, at least 10,000 petrol bombs were seized. And in Chinese University of Hong Kong, during police operation, 3,900 petrol bombs were seized. If one petrol bomb is hurled every 10 seconds, then it would take 11 hours to hurl all of the 3,900 petrol bombs. In the face of grave law-breaking behavior, it is the statutory duty of the police to take measures to safeguard to ensure personal safety and keep our cities safe. We should maintain law and order. And if the public express their views in a peaceful, reasonable, and lawful manner, there would have been no need for the police to exercise any force. The police force is a response to the escalating violence by ruthless criminals. In fact, some cases involved real guns and live ammunition. At least 5 real guns and ammunition were seized, one of them being a rifle. Then the same rifle was used in a mass shooting at a concert in Las Vegas, US, leading to 50 casualties. And even more problematic is that Hong Kong has now had over 10 cases involving bombs, showing signs of emerging local terrorism. And the explosives seized by the police include TATP explosives and also homemade bombs of about 10 kilograms. TATP is the strongest explosives apart from military explosives. It is also commonly used by foreign terrorists. There is no differentiation of victims. Bombs could kill, it could cause grave injuries, it could tear down buildings. When a bomb goes off, no one nearby is spared. It could be anyone in Hong Kong who's injured or who could die as a result of a bomb going off. It could even be one of you here or even your relatives. We need to be vigilant. Bomb cases relate to each and every one of us. I need to remind everyone in Hong Kong that we must remain vigilant and we must be unanimous in reprimanding violence, and we must say no to violence. We must not allow local terrorism to find its roots here. In addition, there are fake news, rumors, and lies on the internet. Even the foreign media organizations became victims because of the use of doctored photos and footages. They had to apologize for incorrect reporting. It started with a footage being doctored such that the bomb hurled at the police by rioters was doctored to become the bomb hurling from the police. The media organization admitted its mistake and apologized to the police. And also for August 31st incident, nobody died, but those engaged in mutual destruction cooked up a story and also held memorial service and conjured something out of thin air. And there were also people who made grave accusations against the police through the media, whilst refusing to provide further information to the police or refusing to give a statement. I can't help but think of a recent case of false reporting. The perpetrator claimed that he was kidnapped and he was stapled with a stapler. He convened a press conference and to tell this make-believe story. In the end, he is sentenced to imprisonment for false reporting. That is why we must be vigilant against these one-sided accusations against the police in front of the media. In fact, Mr. President, since June last year, over 40% of arrestees were students. Over 1,400 people below the age of 18 were arrested, the youngest being 11. He was arrested for possession of offensive weapon. Over 460 students were prosecuted, the youngest 3 being 12-year-olds. They were respectively charged with criminal damage, placement of articles on railway lines with intent to harm passengers, and also unlawful assembly. Over 8 minors have been convicted after trial, and the youngest of them being 13 years of age. He is sentenced to 12 months of probation order for burning a national flag. And another youngster aged 14 is also sentenced for possession of a bomb. And there is a refrain in society that there is no need to be law-abiding. Some people could stop at nothing to achieve his own purpose as long as he thinks it's right. There is no need to be afraid of breaking the law. And this includes criminal damage, exercising torture, hurling bricks, petrol bombs at others, committing arson, using guns and bombs. And some members have continued to support these rioters and call them brothers. Clearly, these brothers are those who advocate and chant slogans of Hong Kong's independence. Let me ask these members, have you severed ties with the Hong Kong independence elements? Mr. President, those adopting the we burn, you burn with us mentality justifies and glorify violence and support violence. Regrettably, it is the young people who have to face the legal consequences. They have no future, they will be imprisoned, whereas the masterminds will gain political points and even pecuniary interest. A female defendant expressed deep remorse after the incident. In the case of possession of a petrol bomb, she pleaded guilty and expressed to the judge that during remand she realized that she should be rational and reasonable in treating people with different political views, and violence is not the solution. Before June last year, when we had not had the massive protests and rallies and violent incidents, Hong Kong was one of the safest cities in the world. We had a low crime rate, we had law-abiding citizens, we had mutual respect, and we lived in peace and harmony. However, when rallies and protests escalated into serious violence, a lot has changed. Police resources have become tight because of the massive protests and rallies and these violent incidents. For 40 years, our crime figures had continued to drop, and now it has risen again. Overall crime figures in 2019 rose by 9.2% compared to 2018. For the overall crime figures in the first 3 months of 2020, they rose by up to 30% compared to the same period last year. In the face of immense pressure and personal threats, our police force continues to remain steadfast in its position to keep law and order. I'm grateful for the contribution and the hard work, as shown in the following examples. Mr. Ray Chan. Yes, point of order. Quorum count, please.
保安局局長。
Secretary for Security. Yes, point of order. Mr. President, I hope that you listen very carefully to the Secretary's speech because he is digressing and he's departing from the budget. And if he isn't digressing, then no matter what we say today, we won't be digressing. The Secretary is responding to members' speeches during the second reading debate of the Appropriation Bill. So far, I do not find the Secretary digressing. Please continue, Secretary. Perhaps because my speech is exactly targeting the Achilles heels of many people. The police force, in the face of immense pressure and personal threats, have remained steadfast to keeping law and order in Hong Kong. I'm grateful to the contribution and the hard work. And let me give you some examples. As from December last year to February this year, in 3 months, the police detected 57 robbery cases. And in December last year, the police successfully neutralized 2 jewelry robbery syndicates involved in 3 cases with a total loss of $10 million. 12 people were arrested and some of the loots were recovered. In the same month, another case was detected involving 3 businessmen with a total loss of $11 million. 8 people were arrested, and in February this year, the police busted the syndicate controlling youths and arrested 15 people, including the mastermind, and the syndicate was involved in at least 10 robbery cases. For burglary, in the past 3 months, the police detected 91 cases. And then in March, the police cracked down on a burglary syndicate, which is involved in 13 burglary cases of eateries and grocery stores. On narcotics, in the middle of this month, the police cracked down on the largest on a case of trafficking in cannabis butts, which is unprecedented, with 580 kilometers of cannabis butts seized, totaling $100 million in market value. In the face of recent face mask scams, the police launched a territory-wide operation this month and arrested 32 people involved in 146 cases of deception, with victims over 400 victims involved and $3 million involved. Imagine, without sufficient resources and manpower, crime rate will spike and law and order will deteriorate. Depriving the police of sufficient resources and manpower will surely please criminals, but by then, who will arrest robbers, burglars, molesters, rapists, fraudsters, and drug peddlers? It is scorched earth politics to cut manpower and resources for the police so that law and order in Hong Kong will deteriorate, and everyone who would like to live in peace and harmony will suffer. Well, Mr. President, many members have spoken and expressed their views. In the face of the current epidemic, Hong Kong is facing a lot of hardship, and we must all stay united so that when the epidemic ends, Hong Kong can recover quickly and our economy can also recover quickly. We agree that we should recover and revive very quickly, but in order to achieve that, we need a safe and stable environment with good law and order in Hong Kong. And there is all the more reason for the police to be equipped with sufficient resources and manpower to maintain good law and order in society. The Council should also be accountable to law and order, and the Council should support the police's budget. I so submit.
Secretary for Labour and Welfare. President, I'd like to respond to member speeches in the Appropriation Bill debate regarding labour and welfare. Much of the speeches did not bear direct relationship to the bill. However, we are of the view that they're still relevant to the measures to support enterprises, safeguard jobs, and relieve burden since August 2019, the budget, as well as the anti-epidemic fund. So I'd like to make some responses here. First off, the recurrent spending for social welfare in 2020-21 is $93.9 billion. The total hits $100 billion or $115 billion. The recurring expenditure is 14.2% higher than the revised estimate, amounting to 19.3% of the total revenue, total recurring expenditure. If you look at the current term, the welfare expenditure has increased by 43.8% compared with 2017 to 18. Elderly has increased by 60%. Some members expressed concerns about elderly service and rehab services, particularly the waiting time for the RCHG. We are adopting a multi-pronged approach. It takes a long time to build these facilities, and by the time they're completed, it will be next term or the term after next. The government is seeking $20 billion to purchase premises for welfare facilities. 1 year on, the item is still queuing up for its turn on the Finance Committee agenda. Let's work together to accelerate the funding proposal. Faced with the economic downturn and rising joblessness, we are adopting a four-pronged strategy: job creation, unemployment support. Job creation. In the coming 2 years, there will be 30,000 time-limited jobs in the public and private sector. The government also creating more than 10,000 civil service jobs and also 5,000 short-term youth interns. Job preservation. We would like the employers to retain staff or even rehire staff or pay those on unpaid leave. For example, an employer under the employment support scheme will, if there are staff members on no pay leave, have to offer pay to the staff in June. Under the scheme, these cover 290,000 MPF contributing and also contributing employers and 1.9 million employees, as well as 215,000 self-employed people. Also in F&B construction sectors, there are a lot of temporary staff. The taxi and red minibus sector also have a lot of self-employed drivers. Under the scheme, 2.6 million people will benefit from the wage subsidy scheme. Last week, members expressed concerns about employees over 65 and also freelancers. In order to encourage employers to keep employees over 65, we are exploring how under the ESS, how we can encompass those aged 65 and above. In the food and beverage, construction, and taxi and red minibus sectors, there are 30,000 to 40,000 workers who are above the age of 65. Of course, there are 20,000 who are working in government outsourced sector, and also 3,000 in the medical and welfare sectors. How we can plug the gaps, we're still looking into this. For example, we are looking at how we can include older green minibus drivers. We may not be able to include everybody in the workforce over 65 in age, but we believe that we should be able to include the majority of them, especially the grassroots workers. It would be rather hard to help the non-MPF contributing freelancers. Particularly, it would be hard to ascertain their usual pay and the pay cut in recent months. Some members suggested making reference to the tax bill. Now, we haven't quite filed the tax return for 2019-20. We only have the record for 2018-19. About half of the workforce do not have to file a tax return for 2018-19, much less the freelancers. In the MPF system, there are 200,000 self-employed people. In the ESS, it would be hard for us to ascertain the usual and the current pay. We will explore how we can offer a lump sum of $7,500 allowance to them. Also, the relevant bureaus are also offering various sector-specific schemes for schools, for the for the sports training interest cards in schools, LCSD, and welfare organizations. They can apply under one of the items for a sum of $7,500. The schemes will cover 52,200 people, and the freelancers can also apply under one of the three schemes and get $7,500. In the budget, the Labour Department is ramping up the support. First, to encourage the employers to hire elderly, young people, and people with disabilities. We will be increasing the subsidy under the employment for elderly and middle-aged scheme, and also the youth employment and training program. All the job training allowance will be increased from $4,000 to $5,000, and under the work orientation placement scheme, it will increase from $7,000 to $8,000. And also on a pilot basis, the Labour Department will offer retention allowance to job seekers eligible under the above scheme. And if they stay up to 3 months, they will be entitled to $3,000. Under the unemployment support, there are three elements: severance pay and long service pay. And the eligible people will get 2/3 of the monthly pay for each of the reckonable years of service. Second, the jobless and job seekers can take part in the placement-tied courses under the ERB, and at the moment it is $4,000. Come May the 25th, it will go up to $5,800. The last element is CSSA. In the FC paper endorsed on the 18th of April, will set up an employment support scheme, and under the CSSA, able-bodied persons as the ceiling will be increased. Take a 4-person family, for example, the asset limit will be increased to $176,000, and the payment that they can get will be averaging out to be $16,000. This may not be a lot, but in this time of difficulty, we have the responsibility to remove the stigma attached to these people who are in need. Members also mentioned income inequality. As I said at the beginning, we have to take a holistic view of the rounds of relief measures since August 15th, and also the 2 tranches of the AEF and the budget. In the policy address, there will be 2 rounds of allowance for the and-nothing people, and this application will begin in July. The second round of application will be accepted come January 2021. A 4P household will get $14,500 in allowance. Under the AEF endorsed by the Finance Committee on the 21st of February 2020, there will be allowance for WFA and student finance assistance recipients. A 4P household with 2 children will get the highest amount that they can get, and they will get $6,400. And after 4 rounds of relief measures, there will be the student grant for secondary, primary, and kindergarten students. And under the AEF, the amount will be increased to $3,500, and this will be released soon enough. The family in the above example will get $7,000. In the budget, we're also offering cash allowance, and this will be dispersed 1 month after the passage of the budget by LegCo. CSSA recipients will get 1 month extra for the standard rate. A single parent with 2 children, they will get $6,985. OALA, 1 month extra payment. The standard rate at the moment is $2,675, and the higher rate is $3,585. Disability allowance, there will be 1 month extra payment. The standard rate is $1,770, and the higher rate is $3,540. old age allowance or fruit money, the extra month allowance is $1,385, and under the work incentive transport subsidy, there will be additional allowance of $300 to $600. It will serve to alleviate poverty. With these words, I hope the members will support the bill.
Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, Mr. President, first of all, I'd like to thank members for their opinions raised during the debate for the Appropriation Bill. For the past 2 years, we have been hard hit by 3 major FS blows: the U.S.-China trade war, the violent conflicts in the society, as well as COVID-19 outbreak. The economy has entered a recession. Hong Kong today faces 2 battles: one against the epidemic, the second is the economic recession. We have to win the first battle before we are able to win the second battle. Therefore, both the government as well as the entire society must stand united to deal with the epidemic, and then we can relaunch our economy. We need to relaunch the economy before we can support enterprises, safeguard jobs, and then we can stimulate the economy and relieve people's burden. Now, I would like to talk about the challenges that we face. We are not just facing with a local economic recession. The global picture is also very bleak. According to the International Monetary Fund, the latest economic forecast is such that the global economy will register a contraction of 3% instead of a positive growth of 3%. The pace of the recession will depend on the extent of the impact of the outbreak on individual economies, and that would also determine the pace of recovery as well. That is, whether they can effectively deal with the outbreak. According to the IMF, for the developed economies, they will record a more significant contraction, like the USA and the Euro area. They will have a negative growth rate of 5.9% and 7.5%. On the contrary, for developing regions, in particular for the Asian region, the drop will be smaller, and there may even be a slight positive growth. And in fact, they are able to rebound much better next year, that is 2021. In fact, they would shed light on our road to recovery. For our major trading partners, mainland China and ASEAN have already overtaken the USA as well as Europe as the first 2 major trading partners, taking up 2/3 of our trade. Japan, Korea, and the Asian markets will also take a larger role, and we can rely on this growth to come out of the economic hardship. For the government and the business sector, we have been making good use of the Belt and Road Initiative as well as the Greater Bay Area Development Strategy, and we will be making good use of the free trade agreement as well as investment agreements established with the ASEAN countries, and this will provide a good foundation for our economic recovery after the outbreak. And then, as the international financial center, as well as a trade and shipping center, we need to embrace the world. We need to break down the barriers, and we should also enhance our economic fundamentals. We have got different economic initiatives in the budget, not just to support the sectors hard hit, but we should also pave the way for economic recovery. I think we have heard a lot of support and agreement from different parties and members in relation to the strategies as well as the initiatives in the debate. To achieve the target, we have had dozens of measures in the budget as well as the 2 rounds of the anti-epidemic fund. We hope that we can extend a helping hand to those who are hard hit, and we can also provide support to enterprises of different scales so that we can come out of the hardship. I'd like to respond to the points made in relation to the worries as well as the doubts from the different sectors. First of all,
From what members have told us, a lot of you mentioned that the business environment is difficult. We have to avoid closure of businesses, and the key point would be the cash flow. The FS, in his February budget speech, told us that he has taken on board the views expressed by different sectors, and there is this concessionary low-interest loan with 100% government guarantee under the Special Financing Guarantee Scheme. The maximum loan amount will be kept at $2 million to support employees' wages and rents for 6 months. The repayment period will be up to 3 years, and the interest rate will be prime rate minus 2.5%. Guarantee fees will be waived so as to support the enterprises. But then the economy is sort of falling drastically, and to take on board your views, in the second round of the AEF, we have enhanced the concessionary low interest loan, and the commitment has been enhanced to $50 billion. The enterprises will each get a maximum loan of $4 million, and then the principal moratorium will be extended to 12 months. Some members were worried as to whether banks would be too strict or too cumbersome and using up too much time in the vetting. In fact, a salient feature of the scheme is that it is being funded by the Hong Kong Mortgage Corporation. Banks will be the executing units. This can reduce the risk of the banks, and then the vetting can be easier and quicker. As of on the 20th of April, the scheme was launched, and in as short as 7 days, we've received 287 applications involving $700 million. 248 have been vetted and approved, involving $600 million. We've also enhanced and fine-tuned the 80% guarantee product and 90% guarantee product. For each enterprise, the loan cap will be $18 million for the 80% guarantee product and $8 million for the 90% guarantee product. And they have subsidies for the interest rates as much as 3%, so that it will be the same as that for the 100% product guarantee. We have a total commitment of $123 billion. In other words, we can provide the cash flow in a timely manner for all sorts of enterprises. Second, we should make good use of the current enterprise support program so that enterprises can enhance their branding, upgrade themselves, and also open up new markets as soon as we come out of the outbreak. The Bureau has a number of popular funds, that is BUD, branding, upgrading, and domestic sales dedicated fund. We have also got the SME Export Marketing Fund. They're useful for enhancing the competitiveness of SMEs and helpful in helping them to open up new markets outside of Hong Kong. Well, we have had a number of rounds of injection of money into the funds, and having listened to the views of members and the industry, we have enhanced the schemes in April. Say, for example, lifting the geographical restrictions so that enterprises can be flexible in spending the money of up to $4 million. And for BUD and the SME Export Marketing Fund, we are subsidizing the participation in virtual exhibitions. I understand that members would like to see the streamlining and expedition of the vetting procedures. We have a balance of $3 billion. We hope that we can make use of such money to help enterprises in their operation as well as their market expansion work. And then we would like to provide a good platform for the market. Now come to the C&E market. We know that for the export of goods and export of services, they are the backbone of our economy. It is important to bear this point in mind. In the 2020-21 budget, the administration has provided an additional $150 million to the Trade Development Council. The total amount of the subvention is $614.2 million. The TDC will enhance its assistance to Hong Kong businessmen in diversifying their business and providing more business opportunities to SMEs. Say, for example, setting up Hong Kong pavilions in major exhibitions held in Europe and mainland. There will be online and offline marketing of Hong Kong products. There will be missions, and we are going to arrange for buyers' missions to come to Hong Kong. Under the AEF, we are providing $1.02 billion so that we have the convention and exhibition industry subsidy scheme. In this way, the subvented or subsidized enterprises can participate in the major exhibitions and conferences held by the TDC, and the number would not be limited. They can also host exhibitions and conferences at the Hong Kong CEC and AWE so as to reinvigorate Hong Kong as the premier center for exhibitions and conventions. We need to help those sectors that are hard hit, in particular the tourism industry. We have been providing sector-specific measures, in particular the tourism industry. All the time, we have been keeping up a close liaison with the Hong Kong Tourism Board, the Hong Kong Travel Industry Council, as well as the tourism sector as a whole. Number of measures have been provided. Say, for example, under the 2 rounds of the AEF, we have the following measures. Under the first round, we have the travel agents subsidy scheme, as well as the licensed guest houses subsidy scheme. 99% of the registrations have been handled. Almost all of them have been receiving our subsidies to the tune of $260 million. Under round 2 of the AEF, we have the travel agents and their staff support scheme, as well as the hotel support scheme. It has been launched for a week. We have received applications from 210 travel agents, together with 890 staff members, 490 freelance accredited practitioners, that is escorts and guides, as well as 150 hotels. You see that the response is very good. I want to point out that outbound and inbound travel have been much affected. It has almost come to a standstill. But then the government and the industry are still holding their ground. The government has provided an additional $791 million to the Hong Kong Tourism Board so that after the outbreak, we can enhance our promotion and revive the desire of travelers to come to Hong Kong. I think we need to open up more business opportunities. We can look to new markets. We have to attract business travelers. All such should be done right now and not after we have come out of the crisis. We need to develop new economic models. Many members have said that the epidemic may bring about long-term changes to our economic models. Say, for example, citizens may be using the online services and high and new technologies more. We have got the early deployment of 5G under the AEF. $60 million have been set aside so that we can have early deployment of 5G across the board. And we have the Distance Business Program under the Innovation Technology Bureau. We hope we can turn the crisis into an opportunity. President, members, regarding the measures I've mentioned, the government has been working hand in hand with different sectors and industries. When we conceive the ideas, strike out the details, and launch them after rounds of review. We'll keep up our dialogue with the industries as well as the stakeholders. Any ideas that can help us to improve the business environment and enhance our support measures will be taken on board by us with an open mind. We hope we can withstand the epidemic outbreak, overcome the crisis, relaunch the economy of Hong Kong, and pave the way to recovery. So I hope members will pass the Appropriation Bill 2020.
I now call upon the Financial Secretary to reply. Mr. President, since I delivered the budget in late February, the situation of COVID-19 has evolved rapidly and the disease has become a global pandemic. The crisis has dealt a severe blow to the global and Hong Kong economy, inducing deep recessions. There are serious disruptions to a wide range of economic activities in recent months, and unemployment has surged. In order to prevent the economy and the employment market from entering a downward spiral, we have launched 4 rounds of relief measures under the Anti-Epidemic Fund, and they were swiftly passed at LegCo. I'm grateful to members for the valuable views they expressed on the 2020-21 budget at LegCo last week. 4 Bureau Secretaries have just given concise responses in respect of some key policy areas of concern to members. Now I would offer an overall response first, an account of the latest economic situation globally and locally. The COVID-19 pandemic has dealt an unprecedented, extensive, and severe blow to both the Hong Kong and global economy. Many countries have imposed lockdowns and social distancing measures of a massive scale to control the spread of the disease. The global economy has been struck by a combined supply and demand shock, whereas the international financial market has also been in violent turmoil. Recent statistics reveal that the global economy has shown a sharp contraction since March, and that a deep recession is inevitable in the first half of the year. In mid-April, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, forecast that the global economy would contract by 3% this year, the worst recession since the Great Depression in the 1930s. The situation was even worse than that during the 2008-09 global financial crisis. Such forecast is based on the assumption that the COVID-19 outbreak would be brought under control in the second half of the year, and hence the epidemic control measures by various countries can be lifted gradually. However, since it's difficult to predict how the outbreak will develop, there is extreme uncertainty around this latest forecast. In order to maintain people's confidence, support enterprises, and resurrect the economy, various economies have adopted very aggressive fiscal measures and have substantially eased their monetary policies. Among the major economies, the mainland has been hit hard by the COVID outbreak. They registered a year-on-year economic contraction of 6.8% in the first quarter, which is the first ever decline on record. Nonetheless, as the epidemic in the mainland has basically been brought under control in recent months, enterprises are resuming operation and the stay-home restrictions are being lifted gradually. The focus of the mainland's anti-epidemic strategy has now shifted to containing import cases. The mainland authorities have implemented an array of fiscal measures, including raising the scale of special bonds for local governments, increasing the deficit ratio and issuing special sovereign bonds, and substantially releasing market liquidity in a hope for the economy to pick up pace again. The U.S. economy has worsened rapidly, with both retail sales and industrial production registering in March the biggest year-on-year decline in more than a decade. All sentiment indicators have plunged. Over 26 million Americans have filed initial jobless claims since mid-March, suggesting that unemployment will soar. Last Friday, the U.S. Congressional Budget Office predicted that the economy would contract by about 12% quarter to quarter, and the unemployment rate would reach 10% in the second quarter. The U.S. has announced a relief package of more than $4 trillion, which is far higher than 10% of its GDP since March. Besides, the Federal Reserve Board has drastically cut interest rates to near zero and launched a quantitative easing program with an open-ended commitment, as well as other extensive measures to support the economy and safeguard financial stability. As for Europe, the European economy has been fast deteriorating since March. The sharp decline in various sentiment indicators, including the preliminary purchasing managers index falling to a record low, shows that it has endured a substantial economic contraction since the second quarter. While the EU and the UK have announced a series of large-scale fiscal and liquidity measures, the European Central Bank and the Bank of England have unveiled large-scale programs to purchase more assets to support enterprises and individuals. In view of the impacts of COVID-19, the Japanese government has introduced fiscal measures amounting to about 9% of its GDP. Japan's central bank has also substantially increased asset purchase. The epidemic has also taken a heavy toll on the performance of other Asian economies in the first quarter. Many economies in the region have experienced a notable slowdown in growth in Q1, with Singapore recording a negative year-on-year growth. The focus of many governments would be to restore the market and work in a gradual manner, and the risks before vaccines are available would also be a key factor for the economy. Meanwhile, the global economy is also facing other uncertainties, including tense economic and political relations between China and the US. Even though the Brexit has entered a transitional period, whether the negotiations can come to an agreement is a rather unknown. Meanwhile, the geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and North Asia, as well as global financial market fluctuations, are factors to take account of. Locally, the COVID-19 outbreak has severely disrupted a wide range of economic activities. The three key drivers of Hong Kong's economy, that is trade, consumption, and investment, were halted. In terms of trade, Hong Kong's merchandise exports dropped by 9.7% in the first quarter year on year. As for private consumption, visitor arrivals in February dropped by more than 96%, and the situation was even worse in March. With the epidemic control measures, people were going out less, and Hong Kong's total volume of retail sales in the first 2 months of the year dropped by nearly 34%, and with weak domestic consumption, investment fared even worse. The labor market continually worsened. The employees of many sectors face no pay leave, pay cut, or even layoffs. The seasonally adjusted unemployment rate for the first quarter rose by 0.5% to 4.2%, which is a 9-year low. As for the combined unemployment in the retail, accommodation, and food services sectors, they increased to 6.8%, which was the highest since the 2008 to 2009 global financial crisis. In terms of inflation, the baseline inflation for the first quarter was 2.9%, which was slightly lower than the 3% in the fourth quarter last year. As the price pressure eased, the inflation pressure would also ease locally, and the local business sentiments remain pessimistic, and various indicators were lower than the boom-bust dividing line of 50. According to the Government Census and Statistics Department, the number of enterprises who would fare worse in the second quarter is 37% higher than the number of enterprises expected to fare better. And the situation was the worst since the first quarter of 2009, and recruitment sentiments remain weak. The local GDP estimate for the first quarter will be announced next week, and many signs show that the decline might be even worse than the 2019 global financial tsunami or the 1999 Asian financial crisis. In the budget, I came up with a forecast for Hong Kong's real GDP growth at minus 1.5% to positive 0.5%. In light of the recent developments, the epidemic would have a serious and enduring effect on our economy, and our GDP performance would be worse than the forecast. The expected GDP contraction would be between negative 4% to 7%. Present Hong Kong's economy is in deep plight. In the face of a drastic challenge, in order to avoid a downward spiral for the economy, the government has been decisive in implementing various measures. in order to secure employment, support enterprises, stimulate the economy, and relieve people's burden. The 2 rounds of measures under the anti-epidemic fund amount to $290 billion, or about 10% of GDP, and the scale is similar to other advanced economies. Together with the 4 rounds of relief measures between August and December last year, a 5% buffer could be provided to the local GDP. We hope that these measures would help recover Hong Kong's economy, relieve stress for enterprises, and support the public. That way we can pick up steam again when the epidemic is under control. President, the focus of this year's budget is supporting enterprises, safeguarding jobs, stimulating the economy, and relieving people's burden. The counter-cyclical measures amount to more than $120 billion with an expected deficit of about $140 billion, which is a record high. For enterprises, in order to tackle liquidity challenges for enterprises, the budget proposed a new concessionary low interest loan, with the government providing 100% guarantee. In the second round of the AEF, the scope has been reinforced, and the SME financing guarantee scheme has been optimized, including the 80% and 90% special guarantee products. In order to ease the operating pressure for enterprises, the budget also proposed concessions on profit tax, property rates, business registration fees, etc. And some measures last year would be expanded, including subsidies on electricity, water, and drainage fees, as well as concessions on government tenants. I also propose concessions on taxes and rates for the public, as well as an extra month's payment under CSSA, as well as 1 month of rent and exam fees. And in light of the special economic conditions, I propose disbursing $10,000 to every Hong Kong permanent citizen aged 18 and above to stimulate consumption and ease the burden on the people. The program was generally well received, and we are proceeding with the preparation. Through a simple and straightforward procedure, we hope to disperse the funds as soon as possible. Since electronic registration would be more efficient than using paper forms, members of the public who use banks for the registration would receive the funds sooner. That is why I encourage people without a personal bank account to open an account as soon as possible. Our target is to start receiving applications by the end of June, and funds would be disbursed from July. I believe most eligible citizens can receive the funds by the end of August. Members, President, we also study the issue with the Labor and Welfare Bureau as well as Social Welfare Department on the possibility of waiving the registration procedures for eligible persons under CSSA and the public assistance schemes. However, since the SWD and LWB believe that priority should be given to deal with the multiple welfare measures announced by the government, including waiving the asset limit of able-bodied adult CSSA applicants, an extra month's allowance for CSSA recipients, and raising the cap on rental subsidy, they might not be able to take up the relevant work on the $10,000 payout, including the relevant systems. At a Finance Committee special meeting earlier, the Secretary for Labor and Welfare offered an explanation already, and as such, for eligible persons under the public security schemes and CSSA would have to make an application electronically or in paper like other members of the public. Apart from the above measures, the budget also proposed a series of measures to develop a diversified economy, strengthen the healthcare system, and building a more livable city that will create a solid basis for our economy and make Hong Kong a more caring and livable city. President, members, the current term government has implemented a series of livelihood and economic stimulus measures, as for government recurrent expenditure. The 2020 to 21 estimate is 10% higher than the revised estimate a year ago. That is $44.2 billion in terms of the overall budget. Education, social welfare, and healthcare make up 60% or more than $280 billion. The cumulative increase in these three areas in the past 5 years have reached 50%. For education, the growth in recurrent expenditure is expected to be 7.8%, which is higher than the 5.9% in the previous year. This makes up 20.5% of all government expenditure, and this is the highest among all policy areas. Last week, some legislative members said the amount or the sum of the education expenditure has worsened, and it was wide of the fact. And such claim ignore the fact that in the last 3 years, the government has increased education commitment by 24% or $19.4 billion. When I delivered the budget in February, the expected deficit for 2019 to 20 would be $37.8 billion. This afternoon, the government would announce the overall provisional figures for the financial account. The consolidated deficit for 2019 to 20 will be $10.6 billion, which is $27.2 billion less than the revised estimate. The main reason is that the number of provisional tax holdover applications were much less than expected, and as such, the profit tax revenue would be $24.5 billion higher than the estimate. Many members expressed concern on the government's long-term financial position. With the declining economy, tax revenue and land sale revenue this year would be affected, and with the measures under the 2 rounds of AEF, the fiscal deficit for 2020 to 21 would increase substantially to about $280 billion or even higher. I must stress that these are special one-off measures under exceptional circumstances. Even though Hong Kong's fiscal surplus will drop from $1.1 trillion to about $800 to $900 billion, this still amounts to 14 to 15 months of government expenditure. Fiscal reserves do not exist for the sake of it. They serve to stabilize Hong Kong's economy. We can say that the reserves we have built down the years could now be utilized in the face of a unprecedented adversity. These can facilitate countercyclical measures to support the economy and support livelihood. Given the current difficulties, utilizing reserves to stabilize the economy and secure employment is a responsible and suitable approach, and this is in line with our long-standing principle of spending when warranted, and this is also in line with public expectations. President, COVID-19 is still developing around the world, and the global economy is in deep plight. Many employees are suffering with a gloomy future. As to when the Hong Kong government can step out of the conundrum, that would depend on epidemic control work around the world and the speed of economic recovery. It also depends on the stability of the Hong Kong society. If the violent clashes, blocking of roads and airport, vandalism at our railway facilities and shops, as well as attacks on members of the public with different views persist, more businesses will close down and foreign investment would be deterred and many people would be out of a job. And if that's the case, the government support measures would be rendered useless. It is not that there is no room for improvement in our society. but we are still a society that is open, free, and diverse. We must face up to the deep-rooted conflicts reflected in the social incidents last year, and they must be resolved, and this requires time and patience. The current economic recession has affected tens of thousands of people and their families, and they are under a very heavy burden. Once again, I urge everyone to put aside their differences in order to resolve the conflicts. So long as Hong Kong people stand united to fight against the epidemic, we will see light at the end of the tunnel. President, members, I urge you to pass the Appropriation Bill 2020 so that the $10,000 can be dispersed to the public as soon as possible, and that other alleviation measures under the budget can be implemented as soon as possible to stabilize the economy and support livelihood. Thank you very much.
嘅待決議題係
I now put the question to you that the Appropriation Bill 2020 be read the second time. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Mr. Ray Chen claims the division. The division bell will ring for 15 minutes.
開始表決。
Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no queries, voting shall now stop. Result displayed: 63 present, 41 for, 21 against. The question is agreed by majority of members present. Appropriation Bill 2020. This council now becomes a committee of the whole council to consider the appropriation